Tang Ping-kang, Deputy Commissioner of Police Operations. On his left-hand side, we have Kong Chiu-chung, Acting Superintendent of PPRB, and on his right-hand side, Mr. Wang Wai-shen, Super Superintendent of Operations Bureau. And then on the right-hand side of the stage, we have Mr. Li Kuai-wah, Senior Superintendent of Organized Crime and Crime Bureau, and far left-hand side, Mr. Sri Yanto Chin-chiu, Superintendent of Explosive Ordnance Disposal Bureau. These rioters are attacking innocent citizens and shops and police officers and causing vandalism. I'm very angry with this. In the past few weeks, rioters have been increasingly damaging our city, attacking citizens and police officers. And the situation is now more extensive, and I think this is a real riot. In particular, they are more and more targeting police officers. It appears that they're trying to kill police officers. For instance, yesterday, a police officer was slashed in his neck by a sharp object, and yesterday it was the first time where homemade explosive devices were used to attack police officers. So they want to kill, they want to seriously harm other persons' bodies and vandalize social facilities compared with other criminals and also other criminals. They are more wicked and evil. We have prepared a footage for you to see. 有人喺側邊伸手攻擊警察，從慢鏡睇到，懷疑嗰個男人係用戒刀割向警員條頸。有人追前，個男人聲稱要報警，不過着黑衫嘅人繼續跟住佢。有人開車去到一間便利店內，之後見到個男人額頭流血，在場嘅急救員為佢治理。大批人圍住着上印有記者背心嘅女人，質疑佢拍攝現場人士。佢嘅帽、口罩、衣服同埋面都有污跡。 Now, as I go on, I will have some pictures to assist me, and please pay attention to the monitor. Last night in Mong Kok, it was the first time we found a handmade explosive controlled by a mobile phone, remote control, and then it exploded in less than 2 meters away from a police vehicle. We have reason to believe that the bomb was meant to target police officers. It's extremely dangerous to make explosives, and the damage can be very extensive, and innocent civilians could be affected. This is highly irresponsible and brutal. We'll do our level best to investigate the case and catch the assailants and hold them liable. I'll pass on to Mr. Lee from our explosive unit to comment at a later stage. Now, in Kwun Tong, yesterday, a police officer was dealing with a case of criminal damage, and then his neck was attacked at close distance using a sharp object that could be a deadly attack. We've reminded reporters not to stay too close to police lines obstructing our work, and this case goes to show that if police officers do not keep a distance, a safe distance from everyone, including reporters, then attackers can very easily come close and harm our colleagues. So when police officers are working, please do not stay close. Otherwise, the police may have to resort to various means, including the use of dispersal force, including pepper spray, to ensure a safe distance between police officers and other people, because reporters have been hit by petrol bombs and even corrosive liquid in the past. We don't want to see anyone, including reporters, to be hurt. So please do not stand between police officers and rioters. You have to work to ensure that you can work at a safe distance. And yesterday, 2 plainclothes police officers in Tseung Kwan O were assaulted by rioters, and they were chased by these people holding weapons, and they were beaten up until they were bleeding. And then in Mong Kok, another mob attacked police officers. A rioter fly-kicked a police officer. All these are targeted at our colleagues, and I'm very enraged. The police will not tolerate any behavior that assault our police officers. Now, for these 3 cases I mentioned, 4 males have been arrested so far. Rioters do not just wrestle with police officers. It is already a common practice for them to use petrol bombs to attack us. Yesterday in the afternoon in Sha Tin, rioters threw petrol bombs at police vehicles, and they set on fire. And then our police vehicle was once in flames. And then there were police officers inside the vehicles, and there are also people driving and or in their own vehicles nearby. Should the fire light the petrol tanks or vehicles, that could lead to an explosion, and the consequence will be very serious. And last night in Prince Edward, there were rioters throwing over 20 petrol bombs at our Mong Kok station within 10 minutes. They are crazy. They have no control, and they are attacking police officers. They have lost their reason, and they are also hurting innocent citizens. For people they don't like, they treat them brutally and beat them up. And should we continue to put up with such behavior? Yesterday, the rioters surrounded and beaten up people who held different views. They intercepted and inspected personal items of residents and even their mobile phones. And if people did not comply, they beat them up until they bled, and they ink sprayed these people. And then they even attacked members of the media, they hurled petrol bombs into buildings with no regard for the safety of other people inside the buildings, because innocent residents could be hurt should the building set fire. I think they would like to silence all people who do not hold the same views as this.
The rioters have had affected the daily lives and the civilians and the livelihood of workers. The large-scale attack on the mass transport system and widespread damage to the control rooms and the turnstile, including setting fire to MTR stations, and also vandalizing the signal system and throwing debris into the tracks, not only led to service stoppage, might lead to catastrophe. Especially on Saturday, the rioters who hurled petrol bombs at the very busy Kowloon Concourse and Lachikok Station exits. For this kind of lone-wolf attacks, we are very concerned. And the rioters have extensively vandalized government facilities, including destroying traffic lights, and which led to traffic chaos, and destroying government complex so that the departments cannot provide normal services to the public. And also vandalizing the very few facilities that hamper the disabled. The rioters have extensively damaged shops, banks, and restaurants, disregarding there are actually families eating inside restaurants, and even set fire in restaurant entrances, disregarding public safety. The Rioters Act have led a lot of the citizens living in fear and wouldn't dare to go out during holidays. To these criminals, the police will rigorously enforce the law and will take more targeted strategy. For example, flexibly deploying resources for rapid responding to emergencies, and also being hide in undercover. And in Kwaichung, at 7 arrests while a bunch of rioters have vandalized a targeted store that we suspect of criminal damage. And he warned all the rioters and the criminals they should not think they should get away. Covering their faces and making to act with impunity. The police will bring these criminals to justice. And now I'll hand over to the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Bureau, Mrs. Chinchu Suryanto, to talk about the case involving homemade explosive, and also later to Mr. Kong on the arrest numbers and case details. Dear members of the press, yesterday at around 8 o'clock last night at the Nathan Road and Phoebe Street intersection, there's a planter where an explosion happened. The EODB staff have arrived at the scene to investigate and collect evidence. After some initial investigation and the statement made by officers at the scene, we can prove that there was an explosion took place. And just before the explosion, and there was a roadblock set up by a protester, in which riot police have actually just cleared that roadblock. And the riot police arrived at the scene. They got off from their vehicle, and there's about 10 to 15 cm from the planter to clear the roadblocks. At the same time, there was a loud thud at the planters, which was an explosion. You can see the photo I'm holding up. That was a screenshot from the police vehicle cam. The yellow circle was the location of the explosion, and a police vehicle happened to be parked right next to the planter. So that was Nathan Road, and on the right there was a jewelry store. And next to the homemade device, there was a planter. From the evidence we collected, they have used an RCIED, a remote-controlled improvised explosive device that was controlled by a mobile phone. They have an explosive part and also a high highly effective dynamite. This tactic and the IED involved is similar to the kind of terrorist events. You have to know that all the explosive, including the homemade explosive, when they're being exploded, they have no difference in terms of the range and the scale of casualty. Anyone at the scene, including our police officers, the members of the public, and the press, might be affected when it's set off. For the whole incident, that's an escalation using explosive with the intent that to kill or to harm the police officers at the scene. Thank you, Mr. Kong. And now I will talk about the operation figures and the arrests. From Saturday to Sunday, which is 11th to 13th of October, and the police operations made 201 arrests, including 146 males and 55 females, aged between 14 to 62. They been suspected of unlawful assembly, possession of offensive weapon, possession of articles for illegal purpose, criminal damage, arson, and wearing face covering during lawful assembly. I would like to cite two cases. Yesterday, the Huaiqing region, acting on intelligence, have sending undercover officers to patrolling near Kaifang Station. At around 3:30 in the afternoon, the officers have found 10 to 15 persons wearing black and with face covering have been congregating outside of Huaiqing Square, thus began to their observation. And they later entered a snack store inside the sector where they're vandalizing the store. Been tolling the shelves and merchandise. And our officers immediately disclosed their identity and arrested 7 persons suspect of criminal damage, including 3 men and 4 women, aged between 13 and 53. And this case has been followed by the criminal investigation team at the Huaiqing region. Of the 7 persons arrested, 6 of those were students. And yesterday, at around 4, somebody had called the police that on the underground floor of the Floria Plaza in Fanling, there are a large group of black-clad rioters face covered is vandalizing a bank. The police then gave them pursuit, and then the rioters entered an open-air car park, which arrested 20 men and 6 women, aged between 13 and 27 years old, is suspected of unlawful assembly, criminal damage, and possession of articles for unlawful purpose. In this case, of this 26 persons, 18 of those were students. If any school or student or young people have been misled into thinking that these acts will call a renovation and decoration, quote-unquote, let me reiterate, of the 2 cases, the acts were all illegal. This is a criminal damage. It is not any renovation or decoration per se. The police will continue to be proactive and bring these criminals to justice. On court prosecution, we prosecute a 128-year arrested man suspected on September 14th of attacking 2 women and 1 man at Kowloon Bay Amoy Plaza. The offense charge include unlawful assembly, wounding, and wounding leading to bodily harm, and have been arraigned at the Kwun Tong Magistracy. On the using of ammunition, on 11th of October, no ammunition has been used. On Saturday, 12th October, the police have used 2 rubber baton run and 1 rubber slug and 2 super sock. And yesterday, 13th of October, Sunday, we used 8 CS grenade and CS round, 8 rubber baton round and rubber slug, and 24 super sock, and 7 40mm launcher.
police officers injured. Over the last weekend, 12 colleagues were injured while on duty. More serious cases include the one mentioned by Mr. Tang just now. In Kwun Tong, a colleague was attacked at his neck by a sharp object. There was a cut of 3 to 4 cm in length, and his vein was affected, and his nerve was also suffered, but they've been repaired after operation, and he is now in intensive care unit. And then for the 2 plainclothes police officers attacked in Zhangguanou, one had a few cuts at the back of his head, his face, and also his limbs, and the cuts with the length of 1 to 4 cm, and he is now in hospital waiting for further operation. The other officer had a cut or a laceration at the back of his head, and he had 6 seizures and is now discharged. Now, there is an accusation from organization that we did not follow the guidelines for dealing with persons that are mentally incapacitated. Let me clarify. Around 9 p.m. On last Saturday, outside Mong Kok Police Station, there were people using laser guns pointing at our colleagues. And then they also yelled and had disorderly behavior outside police station. We arrested 3 persons, including one aged 32 MIP. The arrested person was brought to our duty officer, and he reported himself to be mentally handicapped, and is show us a card for the disabled. However, he hasn't got the care card issued by the police with him. Still, we arranged for a fit and proper adult to accompany that person in further investigation. And we can confirm that the arrested person gave his statement in the presence of a lawyer. And when he requested to see a doctor, we made immediate arrangements for him. And we noticed that there were accusations that we sent up plainclothes officers to make arrests at Zhangguanou. It was around 6:30 p.m. on Saturday or on Sunday. There were 5 off-duty officers. They arranged to meet together for dinner before reporting to duty. And then at the junction of Toming Street and Tongzhen Street, they saw rioters setting up barricades, and then a protester had a petrol bomb in his hand, trying to light it and to throw it. And we stopped and arrested that person at once for possession of offensive weapon. And I'll give the floor to Mr. Tang. Let me reiterate. Well, for the rioters who threw petrol bombs and vandalized the facilities, they were not protesters. They were rioters. They were criminals. They caused damage and wounded people, and they were just as base as triad elements. They attacked unarmed civilians. They damaged facilities, and they beat up people who they did not like or who had other views. And for people like security officers, they wanted to silence them. They intimidated them and said that they would bully their families so that they could not do any business, and people would not patronize at these shops. They would even vandalize their shops. They had resorted to all means to undermine our ability to enforce the law. They used fake news to smear the police officers, to divide members of the public and the police force and government departments. And even within the police force, they even doxed police officers and their family members and even attacked them. I have to say that we will not be intimidated. We will be more united and determined to protect the public. If members of the public continue to remain silent and condone and tolerate such behavior, they will go from bad to worse. Faced with these challenges, we cannot only rely on enforcement by the police. We need the cooperation of members of the public. We'd like to appeal here. First, members of the public should not take part in illegal activities and should advise your friends from so doing. And if you see any crime happening, you should report it to the police as soon as possible. And when police officers are at work, do not obstruct us, and you should not surround us. You should leave the scene at once. Otherwise, you may obstruct our enforcement action. You may put yourselves at risk, or inadvertently, you might be helping these criminals and rioters to flee. Lastly, may I appeal to the public to help the police to restore order in society.
Over the past 19 weeks, rioters' violence has been escalating and reached an alarming level. Social unrest and widespread rioting have turned Hong Kong into a chaotic and panicked situation. I'm angered by all these criminal and riotous acts. Rioters brutally beaten up innocent citizens as they pleased, and inflict extensive damage to transport facilities and public properties with wildcat tactics. Apart from vandalizing shops, rioters also set buildings on fire and threw petrol bombs with lone wolf tactics. What's more alarming is that rioters have escalated their violence against police officers. In one of the worst attacks, a rioter stabbed our officer's neck at close range. This attack shows intent to take his life. Also, yesterday, it was the first time we have found homemade bombs. These rioters launched various reckless and ruthless attacks. And I must emphasize, Hong Kong society cannot tolerate such lawless acts, and the criminal acts have crossed all moral boundaries. We express the strongest condemnation against these rioters. Now I'll highlight some key observations. Firstly, rioters' destruction and disruption of transport system has become more widespread and dangerous. Some rioters set fires and threw petrol bombs inside operating MTR stations and on tracks. The passing trains had to halt instantly, and this poses a grave danger to passengers' safety, and it could have been a man-made disaster. Secondly, for the first time during this social unrest, we seized a homemade bomb. At around 8 p.m. yesterday, while our vehicles was passing through Nathan Road in Mong Kok, some explosive erupted just 2 to 3 meters away from the car. We believe such explosives were intended to attack our offices. We strongly condemn the manufacturing of explosives, and it is a highly dangerous act that can cause heavy casualties. Thirdly, rioters' violence against police officers has reached a life-threatening level. And on one occasion last night, rioters threw as many as 20 petrol bombs at the Mong Kok police station. And over in Sha Tin, rioters threw petrol bombs at moving police vehicles and setting them on fire. And this put not only the police officers, but every other road users at great risk. In conclusion, I must reiterate that these people doing violent acts are not protesters. They are indeed rioters and criminals that are destroying our rule of law. Whatever causes they claim they are fighting for can never justify such tribe-like behaviors. If you still tolerate such acts, you are simply inciting them to escalate their violence. We, Hong Kong police, will continue to enforce the law impartially and bring all offenders to justice. And in the meantime, I have to appeal for your help and support. We need every citizen to play their part in helping us restore law and order. Please refrain from any obstruction when our officers are carrying out their lawful duties. Please cut ties with these criminals and rioters. And please help us to bring Hong Kong back to the right track. Thank you.
跟住落嚟有我哋嘅問答時間，麻煩想係發問嘅記者咧，請先舉手，然之後係後發問嘅。
Questions, please put up your hands. TVB. Good afternoon. Journalists are most concerned about this issue. Now, you've been talking for half an hour, but you did not mention the injury sustained by a driver of Now TV. His head was shot by your projectile, and then he was wearing a reflective vest, and he claimed to be a driver of Now TV. How come he was still arrested? And then his colleague told police officers that he was a colleague, and then he was pointed at with pepper spray. I'd like to know why he was arrested, why he was shot with a beanbag round or bullet rubber, and then he claimed that he was pushed to the wall and beaten. Why? And how are you going to deal with this case?
And it will be reported that some of the policemen that have been appointed by the commissioner in other discipline services for this special duty policeman. Is it happening? For the past 4 months, you've been stressing that the police force had a competent and capable of dealing with any type of crimes. And so is that true? And tactical, we could see difference in making arrests. For example, on Saturday, outside Mongkok Police Station, there were plainclothes officer, and we saw that the vehicles with the LCSD logo making arrests. Is that a new tactic? Can you talk a bit more about the IED, and what is the potential scale of destruction? Do you require a lot of expertise in making this IED? On your first question, I'll defer to Mr. Kong. And for the fourth question on the explosive, I'll hand over to Mr. Surianto. And for the special duty policeman, I think you are referring to the public order ordinance of the Section 40. The chief executive can instruct the police commissioner in writing to appoint anyone willing to assume the post of the special duty officer. I believe that's what you're referring to. And for the past 4 months, we have not invoked this clause to help with our operations. And any way that can bolster our enforcement should be considered and worthy of studying. I said I may study and won't rule out anything, but at this stage, we are not doing it. As for other mention of using other tactics, and for target the Rioters Act, we will take a different approach, and also we'll use different strategy. For example, sometimes we will disperse them, sometimes we make arrests, or even we might send a policeman at the scene so they can arrest when they're committing the act. So it depends on the situation, we'll deploy different strategy. I will now defer to Mr. Kong to talk about the case involving the Now TV driver. This morning at around after 1 o'clock in the morning, the police had found that some of the rioters at Prince Edward West near Tong Choi Street, which is the intersection outside of Mongkok Police Station, and hurling petrol bombs towards the police station. And the colleague at the police station at the scene have issued warnings. And when the warnings were unheeded, we have shoot some beanbag rounds and rubber bullets towards the direction of the rioters. Afterwards, at the mentioned location at the intersection of Prince Edward Road and Tong Choi Street, we have arrested 2 men suspected of arson. And we also noticed that one person, which we believe to be the employee of that TV station, at the direction of the fire in which he fell. And we sent officers to take a look, and based on safety reasons and for the sake of further investigation, our colleagues seized at that location where the fire was set, and where rioters had hurled petrol bombs from that direction. And we see that we must, as soon as possible, bring it back to the police station for take a further study. And our colleagues saw that the employee was not wearing the reflective vest, and I was holding reflective vests. We wanted to know what was going on, and due to safety reasons, we had brought it inside the police station. And there was a colleague who approached us to explain. Our colleague noticed that, and because we mentioned in the past we were concerned the person in just due to security reasons, we want to create a safe distance so that the people would not surround the officers. And earlier on, and someone was hurled petrol bomb in that direction. Thus, our goal was to bring that person to the police station for find out furthermore. And the PPRB colleagues at about 1:40 a.m. and aware, and the media have contacted us, and right away we got to know about the Cosmo incident, and our media liaison team had arrived at the Macau police station for assistance. And as we found out what had happened, the PPRB like you said, we saw that had been the differing version of the story that person concerned was trying to get his car, that he had a reasonable grounds to appear at that spot. Thus, we relay this message to the colleagues at the police station, and after the query have been cleared, we released him. After clearing the confusion, we allowed this employee to call his colleague at the TV station and also the person in charge, just as to report himself as safe. So after being done with all these arrangements, we also called an ambulance, and the ambulance arrived at the police station and took him to the hospital. In the process, we have not formally arrested this TV station employee. Just before the police station was attacked by petrol bombs, thus our police station was safeguarding the premise. So you can see from yesterday's footage, you see that from time to time we will issue warnings if anyone attacking the police station. We will ask the people congregating outside the station to leave. As for the employee of the media being hurt, we express our condolences. And last night, as of this morning, we have been in touch with that person in charge of the station, and we hope him a speedy recovery. We mentioned many times, in the operation in the past few months, there were a location we see a very risky. When the Prince Edward East Road and the intersection of Tung Choi West, there were petrol bombs being thrown, we may use other force and projectiles in that direction. If we stand at that spot, there will be danger. We also like to remind the professional journalists and the employees of the media they should report from a safe location and wear their reflective vests for easy identification by our officers. And for the escalation of violence over the past few months, we see many situations, and the police and the reporters may got hit by petrol bombs or by corrosive fluids. We attach great importance to the safety of the media. As for the communication misunderstanding in this incident, we would like to say sorry, apologize. And last night I have interviewed myself and find out from the media involved and to provide accurate information to the Macau police station and hopefully to resolve this incident. And we had immediately dispatched our media liaison team to the police station so as to make the police station and to improve the communication with the media involved. And there was mentioned that there was allegation of using excessive force inside police station, which we were quite concerned about, and we will actively follow up. We will maintain close communication with the media company concerned. We also know that that employee is now undergoing treatment. When his health allows it, we will find out from him what happened. That's my account.
Mr. Lee, can you comment on the explosive item? The strength of the IED, well, it received a signal by means of a mobile phone for detonation, and it was not a very strong IED. It caused a big hole and some signs of burn in the plant, and our officers were also of some distance away from the planter, so we heard a loud bang, and we knew that there was an explosion there. As regards whether you need a lot of expertise to make an IED, not necessarily, so long as you have some understanding of chemicals and you know how to work with electronics. However, people capable of making effective IED, improvised explosive devices. CNN.
Hi, Isaac from CNN. Firstly, regarding the explosive device found yesterday in Mongkok, you're currently investigating the incident. First of all, you mentioned that the device is similar to those used in terrorist attacks. So are you therefore investigating this as a case of terrorism? And secondly, the expertise required to make an IED device, you said not necessarily a lot. However, the materials that were used to make the explosive device, are they hard to get? And if so, how did the bomb maker manage to obtain such materials?
Okay, so first of all, I'll ask Mr. Lee from EOD to explain a little bit more about the technical aspect, and then I'll ask Mr. Lee of OCTP to talk about the investigation. Mr. Lee, EOD first.
Okay. I'll go with the technical bit about the acquiring of the possible explosive. The explosive itself, what we believe to be a homemade style, and which we encounter the similar cases in July this year, and such as the TATP that we had in July in Chunwan. And that require a certain level of the chemical knowledge background and experiment to formulate a viable explosive, such as TATP. And the way of getting that is require a lot of knowledge and a lot of trial, and at the same time, it is very sensitive and dangerous. So having said that, the readiness or the level that they can get the explosive easily is so difficult. It's almost, they have to manufacture based on the very knowledge, and it will take a lot of time for them to experiment. And regarding the investigation of the IED, whether they're based on the terrorism trail, I'll leave that to the OCTP, Mr. Lee. Yeah.
As far as the investigation of this kind of cases, we normally will follow different lines of inquiry. First of all, just the mention by the reporter that will be dealing about the how or the material used for making the bomb, the explosive, and secondly, we'll be focused on the personality. And the final one, we'll be looking into whether there is a connection with the previous cases. But I have to say that at this time, we have no evidence will be any connection with the previous cases. Just mentioned by my EOD colleague that we detected in the Julys. So we will be looking into these cases carefully, and because these are very, very serious cases. And so far, because we know that the case is the objective, the motivation is primarily is focused on the officers involved. So that's all my part. Thank you.
Next question, Ming Pao. Good afternoon. I'd like to follow up on the case involving Now TV. Now, if the employee from Now claimed that he was shot at the back of his head, shouldn't he be sent to the hospital in the first instance, even for a suspected murderer? I think his life should be given primary consideration rather than keeping him in a police station for 2 hours. This showed no regard for his life. And then the Now TV employee claimed that he was assaulted at a stairwell, leading to 9 wounds on his body, including fractures. You mentioned taking proactive investigation. I'd like to know along what direction. Will you suspend the officers concerned from duty first? Is it true that the management of the force can no longer control the emotions of your frontline officers? You talked about stopping violence. In fact, your police officers recreated violence inside your police station. I'd like to know whether the senior management of the force would apologize and be held responsible for this incident. And I'd like to follow up on the report by Sing Tao today. Has the force formally made a request to the CE? Does the force admit that you are no longer capable of stopping violence and you need the assistance of other disciplined services? The last question is, in Zhongkano Hospital, a medical doctor has been arrested. What was he doing when he was arrested, and why was he arrested? I'll take the second question in relation to the report by Sing Tao Daily First. As I said, any law or measure that can assist the police to enforce the law, well, we will maintain an open mind and we'll see whether it can be of help. At this moment, no members of other disciplined services have been appointed as special constables. In the past 4 months, our colleagues have been working very hard, very long hours, very challenging, and they face risks to their life. It's just like yesterday when an officer was attacked in his neck. We face a lot of challenges, but we will not be intimidated because of attacks targeting our police officers. We'll continue to work hard and to contribute to the law and order of Hong Kong. We are not going to be intimidated. And I will defer to Mr. Ko for further details. But as the Deputy Commissioner of the Police, our police officers in the course of duty will not have to use force if the rioters are not using violence. Well, if the other party is using violence, then we must use necessary force to stop such unlawful acts. I now give the floor to Mr. Kong, and he will talk about the Zhang Guan-O case. Thank you. You referred to the employee of a certain media agency. I already gave you the details in answering a previous question, and I will not repeat the details. The employee from the media agency is now injured. We're very concerned, and we would like to send him our regards and condolences. As for the cause, well, as I said, after we opened fire towards the intersection of Prince Edward East and Tung Choi Street, where petrol bombs were throwing at us, well, perhaps it's the possibility that he was injured by a projectile, and his injuries might have been caused when he fell to the floor. As regards indiscriminate use of force inside a police station, we'll follow up on that. Our PPLB will liaise with the media agency to find out more, and our couple will also take the initiative to intervene and investigate whether we should have sent him to the doctor first. I agree that he was wounded, and I have to understand more about details of calling for the ambulance. When a member of the media is injured, I think there is room for improvement when it comes to arrangement for medical treatment.
As for the arrest at TKO, I will not repeat his identity. It happened on Sunday at around 5:30 in the afternoon. At the Chongyin Street Popcorn Shopping Center, there were as many as 200 people assembling and jeering. And we got a police call. There was a coffee shop inside that was vandalized. Thus, we sent officers to handle the situation and conduct dispersal. In the process, 2 men refused to leave the scene, and repeatedly heckling may likely may cause us commotion and let others at the scene may jeer and disrupt the order. Disrupt the order. Our colleagues had warned twice to stop this disruptive acts and to leave immediately. And these 2 gentlemen refused to listen to our warnings. And finally, we arrested them for disrupting the public order. So that's so much I can say about this. Next, excellent, Xinhua New Agency. From Xinhua News Agency. First question. We noticed that the police last month, since the end of September, they have this narrative towards the protesters that the acts were a step closer to terrorism. As for yesterday's violence, the police would have a new definition or new judgment concerning them. And second, and for the arrest yesterday for the Kun Chong, the policeman, that he was stabbed by the neck. So you have arrested a person at the scene, and how would he be charged? Would it be a charge on wounding or even murder? I also noticed that at the last week, the police conference had mentioned there were protesters have illegal interception at the Castle Peak Road. And inspect their phones and also their identity cards. And the police claim that this person have illegal assembly, obstruct police officer, and covering face illegally. And I wonder if the charges commensurate to their crime. And third question, I want to find out that yesterday that the policeman injured, how was his condition? Can you give us more details? And how was he injured? And how close was his injury to his vein, and what damage could be caused? And also for the injured policeman, how was his mood, and what is the morale of the whole force? And would it affect the morale? Did this incident affect the police morale? Thank you for your question. And if you don't mind, I would still like to respond in Putonghua despite my lack of will. Okay, let's get things out speaking Cantonese. As for the police morale question, let me take that first. And for the Terrorism Act and the police injury, I'll defer to Mr. Lee of the OCTV. So after over 4 months, our colleagues have been working extremely long hours. We are having under a lot of pressure and also threat to our lives, and our details have been doxed, and so are our family members. and they still adhere to their duty. As the Deputy Commissioner, I'm quite proud of the performance of the front line. As for the future challenges, besides the police continue with their work, we need all sides of society to continue to support us and cooperate with us to cope with this challenge and hope that we could restore social order ASAP. I now defer to Mr. Lee to answer a question on terrorism, on also the officer injury. Thank you, Mr. Tang. On terrorism, the Hong Kong police definition of terrorism that in accordance with the United Nations anti-terrorism ordinance of CAP 575. In terrorism, there are two scenarios. First, on the act. For example, there are a serious violence, a serious damage to property, or a huge risk to public health, or disruption in electronic system, or destroy infrastructure. So that's the act itself. Just the act itself isn't enough to prove that there's terrorism. You need to consider together with a motive, which is to forcing some members of the public and the government to implement a political or religious or intellectual ideal. So that is the written definition. To define terrorism, there are 2 points we must place close attention. First, where the organization of the activity and the frequency, and also we need to make reference that whether any special intelligence that which as decided is a terrorism, and now we are maintaining our judgment that the risk of terrorism threat is medium. On the charges, on the uniformed officer being stabbed, and while that we are charged with attempted murder, and for what are the final charges to bring him to court, we need to consult with the Department of Justice. I would like to spend some time to talk about the difference between the 2 charges. Most importantly, that when he launched the assault with any motive to take their lives, it required investigation to determine that. However, I must stress everyone, and on this case, in social media, it was mentioned that he was intent to harm our officer. Another point, regardless of any charges, that whether it's the attempted murder or wounding, under the Injuries Against Persons Ordinance, the maximum penalty is life imprisonment. Thank you. Let me supplement to the injury suffered by the officers. As for the Kwun Tong station, the stabbing case against a police officer, on the right of his neck there are a 3 to 4 cm wound, in which the jugular vein was, and some nerves were damaged. And yesterday he had an operation to reconnect the nerves and the jugular vein. This colleague is now still in the intensive care unit. Next question. Now, news. A question about our colleague. How would you follow up the case? Have you checked the CCTV footage? And any CCTV at the police station staircase, since he would claim he was assaulted there? And do you know that which were the colleagues that brought him to the station? Would you find out from them? And what had my colleague done at the police station that led to this treatment by your colleague? And even if he's not a media employee, for just any ordinary citizens, he should not be subject to such treatment by police officers inside the station. And Mr. Kong claimed that he was never formally arrested. But why you have to have hands tied at the back of the hall to the station, since he was not resisting and was pinned down to the ground? So he was shot at the back of the head. Why? First, was that fire from the balcony? Why you aim at the back of the head of a running person?
Mr. Kong, as I mentioned, we'll take the initiative to follow up on the case. At this stage, the most important thing is to keep all the evidence at the scene, including CCTV footage and records of the police officers and records of police on duty. As for using plastic straps to bind him, because there were queries on the part of our colleagues not yet answered, and then the case was rather dangerous. And then colleagues decided to bind him with plastic straps before taking him in to prevent other safety issues. You talked about he being shot at his head. Now, at the junction between Prince Edward West and Tung Choi Street, some people threw petrol bombs from there, and some colleagues fired beanbag rounds and rubber bullets towards that location, and we arrested 2 persons for suspected arson. We don't rule the possibility that your colleague, perhaps he was within our fire range, and so he was shot, and that would be within the scope of our investigation. Did you ask your colleagues whether our colleague was beaten inside the police station? Now, we will keep the CCTV footage, and we will find the relevant records, and we will try to find out the details of the case. As you suggested, we will try to understand from colleagues who were associated to find out the details. Tai Kung Pao. I'm from Tai Kung Pao. Yesterday, previous sites of the Tai Kung Pao got thrown petrol bombs, and then also got on fire. And have you investigated the case? And then a student was. And then in Kwun Tong, a student was involved. Are you concerned that it is now a common practice for police officers to be attacked? And then I'd like to follow up on the case of the woman who was shot in her eye on the 11th of August. Regarding a former site of your press agency, I will give the floor to Mr. Kong. Referring to the case you just mentioned, at about 5 p.m. yesterday, on the 13th of October, 5 black-clad persons smashed the glass doors of Kodak building, number 321 Java Road, and then they threw petrol bombs into the foyer of the building. Fortunately, no one was hurt. That was classified as a case of arson and damage. criminal damage. As far as we know, no person has been arrested yet, and we found some characters painted with black ink on the walls of the building, and then there was an office of your agency in the upper floors, and we would first check the CCTV. We hope to identify the suspects using such investigation. Mr. Lee. In Kwun Tong, a police officer was wounded yesterday. Regarding details of the arrested persons, because the case is under investigation, I cannot disclose the details. You asked about information online about targeting police officers and other crimes or offenses. In our cybersecurity division, we have been investigating such cases. If there are such remarks and if appropriate, we may make arrests. So you can rest assured. That reporter asked about a case when a woman had one eye wounded on the 11th of August. Because the woman has made a judicial review in relation to our request to seek information of the case. Since the case is sub judice, I cannot comment. SCMP.
Hi, from SCMP. I've got a question about. I just want to follow up on the Now TV station employee first, and then I'll have some other questions relating to other matters. First of all, on the first question, why is it that you've already managed to arrest 4 people in 3 places relating to assaults to police in Kwun Tong, in Cheung Kwan O, and in Mong Kok, but in the case of the suspected attack on the Now TV station employee that involving some of your own officers, that you were not able to make such an arrest, and you said that you still need time to investigate. So why is it that it took you even longer time to investigate your own employee, and you have not been able to give us any information on that? Has there been any delay or any is that a matter of priority for you? My second question relates to the reports about asking other disciplined forces to help you with the policing of recent protests. I know that you have not ruled out such possibility, so will you tell us a little bit about how, if you actually ask the chief executive to allow you such powers, how would that precise arrangement be? And does that mean that the police force has been struggling with keeping up with the policing of recent protests? My third question relates to the use of other vehicles given by other government departments. Are you worried that using such tactic will actually put other government departments in the target of the protesters? And would you also say that this is a change of tactic on your part because you want to protect frontline officers better? Thank you.
Okay, I'll answer the second and third question first, and then I'll hand back the first question to Mr. Kwong. I think I have to clarify that what I said is I do not rule out the possibility of adopting or to researching about any law or any policy that can help our effective policing. And I do not say that I am now researching the special constable that, as you said. I'm saying in general, we welcome any suggestions about law or policy that can help to enhance our policing effectiveness. And then, as I said, we are determined to maintain the law and order in Hong Kong. And as a matter of fact, over the past few months, we are having assistance from different departments, including other disciplinary services in different aspects, including the provision of vehicles. Over the past 4 months, we have more than 100 vehicles being damaged that cannot be used. As you can see, yesterday at least we have a couple of vehicles that are being broken by those violent protesters and rioters. So that's the reason why we need extra resources from other government departments, in particular in transportation. And in fact, I have to say thank you to other government departments and other disciplinary services in providing those services. Thank you. And I hand over to Mr. Kwong for the first question.
Okay. First of all, I have to express our concern for the injuries of the driver of a TV station. We hope he will recover soon. And also, I have to point out there is a fundamental difference between the cases of assaulting a police officer that quoted by you and the incident in which the driver of a TV station was injured. The difference is that, for example, for the cases happened in Kwun Tong in which our officer was stabbed at his neck, we could see the whole process of attack through a lot of live TV news and different video captures. So we have overwhelming direct evidence to prove the offense. And also, as you could see in the Kwun Tong case, actually our injured officer was so courageous that he, even though he was seriously injured, he tried to grab or try to intercept the suspect immediately, so that an immediate arrest was made. But for the incident that happened in small hours this morning, as I have mentioned in Cantonese, there's a possibility that he was accidentally shot by our super shot round or the rubber bullet, which were originally aimed at some rioters throwing the petrol bombs from the junctions of Prince Edward Road West and Tung Choi Street. And as according to our officer, after he was accidentally shot, he fell down, and so the reason of the injuries has to be confirmed. And as I have mentioned, we are actively investigating this case, of course, including identifying which officers had handled this injured person, as well as we have to retrieve any CCTV record, etc., from the police station. So if our investigation reveals any evidence, it will decide the way forward of our action. And that's all of my answer. Thanks.
最後3條。Cable。
Last three questions. Cable. First question on the mentally handicapped person being arrested. So according to Mr. Kong, what's different from the lawyer's version of events? The lawyer first claimed that the arrested person did have a care card in his possession. Can you clarify that? So which side had the story wrong? And you claim that this MIP had been accompanied by a suitable adult. So what was that person? Is that as described the lawyer or the social worker claimed that was the superior? Why didn't he call the social worker to accompany him instead of call his superior and didn't call his family member? And when time the social worker was dispatched, they were refused, not allowed to meet the arrested person. Is it in line with your handling of the mentally handicapped persons? And for the mentally handicapped person, he claimed to be assaulted by police officers and he lost a tooth. Why didn't the police notice it? And when were the injuries caused? Were they caused inside the police station? That's the first question. As for the Now TV driver, you claim you have no formal arrest, and the other journalists have asked that his hands were tied. Why were his hands tied? If you claim that it was a split-second moment and also after the petrol bomb was thrown, why did you bring him into the police station of safe location but actually tied up his hands instead? Is it that something that looked like an arrest is more important than his life? And the Now driver had said inside that he was in the station for 2 hours. In that 2 hours, what procedures have happened? Have we collected his statement, or what other procedures have he been undergone? And for the injuries, Mr. Kong has said that he could be wounded by a beanbag round or a rubber bullet. And for other injuries, for example, on his forehead, on his legs, can you say what are how the injuries were caused? He claimed that the injuries were caused by his fall to the ground. So, in what understanding, what caused his injuries? That's all for me. For the two questions, I defer to Mr. Kong. So whether the person had his care card, that information provided by my colleague. As for whether he have a care card in his possession, it could be seen as a critical point. Even without the care card, in my clarification, I had stated that in his possession we found, I need to dig up the information, just to be precise. We found that the mentally handicapped person identity card, and we bring this arrested person to meet the duty officer. He stated clearly that he is mentally handicapped. So with this when he launched this care card system, one of the objectives, so that when we deal with the mentally handicapped, whether they're making arrests or reporting crime, we can cater him as a mentally incapacitated person. Having a care card or not doesn't matter, because in his handling we know that he has such relevant needs and we cater to that. That's the most important. That's the point of launching this care card. Now that his objective has been fulfilled, whether he had a card or not, I would not like to argue here. As soon as we aware we have such needs, our procedure that we need to locate him the appropriate adult, because we ensure his interests. And I had mentioned earlier that in collecting witness statement, what they were accompanied by this lawyer. As for whether this appropriate adult, which would be more appropriate, according to the records, we've asked this arrested person, can you provide any family members or contacts of friends so we can help you to get in touch with them so as to cater to his welfare? So he provided us the contacts of his friends or family members and his contacts at his workplace. And finally, we got in touch, and those willing to arrive at what his colleague at the workplace. As for the injuries he sustained, I don't have any information. I can't say that how his injuries were formed. If the person felt grievous or in the process he is not satisfied, he can file a complaint against us, and then we shall investigate. And the two social worker claims arrived at the station, but they were not allowed to meet the suspect. I got it. Let me take this question. Procedure-wise, we have to ensure that this mentally incapacitated person's welfare to be safeguarded. We will try to locate an appropriate adult and correct me or supplement me if necessary, Mr. Lee. As for the appropriate adult, First, we'll try to contact the family members. Unless the special circumstances, otherwise, the family members should be most concerned about the welfare and know them best. And next, we'll try to locate the guardians or friends. If we can't locate neither of those, we will contact the social welfare department to see if they can provide us with a social worker. As for when they arrive at the police station and claim them as a social worker and want to provide help to certain persons, I suppose they will be behind the two priorities I mentioned, and I will try to illuminate on the appropriateness of the appropriate adult. And Mr. Kong explained clearly that who we chose to contact. We put his welfare first. So what are the considerations? First, whether the person can provide an emotional support to the arrested person. Second, is there any way they can know details of his welfare plan where they can make suggestions to the police? So we prefer someone that know him well. If another kind of person approached him, we want to consider whether they can fulfill these two roles. And the next important role, they need to be served as a witness in the whole case investigation. If we see there's someone he knows from work can fulfill the role as an appropriate adult, then we would deem it as appropriate. As for the second part, as for the media employee that was injured in the small hours in the morning, I first explain why do we have to put him on plastic band.
Let me explain. It's not just in the past few months, even in previous operations, we have done the same. To ensure the safety and security of arrested persons, from time to time we use plastic straps or even handcuffs to subdue the arrested person before taking him away. That is for the safety and security of the person concerned and also other people. We have court cases to confirm that we can do so for security and safety reasons. We want to take the person away as soon as possible, but if we cannot ensure safety, well, we have to strike a balance. So I can only say that it was the assessment of our colleagues to use plastic straps first. As regards why it took us 2 hours for sending him to the hospital or to release him, well, I maintained very close with members of the media as a member of the PPLB. Last night we spent some time to do the liaison work and to confirm his identity, and that was already around 2:30 a.m. As I mentioned, we gave an opportunity for the employee of the TV station to contact his colleagues and also the person in charge of his agency to report his safety and to discuss the way forward. I mentioned to the relevant person of the station concerned that we would take him to the doctor. I asked whether we should be the party to call an ambulance or would they do it. So there was some discussion. So in the 2 hours, first we tried to understand unclear points of the incident. When at last the unclear points were sorted out, we didn't arrest him and he was released. We allowed him to contact his company, and we also discussed the arrangements for him to seek medical treatment, and that's why we used 2 hours. Regarding his injuries, I don't think we should make any speculation or conclusion here. I was referring to some possibilities, so I will take the initiative to understand the case to find out the cause of his injuries. There can be many, including accidentally hit by a projectile and a fall after the hit, and even the allegations that his wounds or injuries were caused inside a police station. We don't rule out any of the possibilities. We can only confirm after detailed investigation. Can't he be sent to the hospital while you're trying to confirm his identity? Why did you have to wait until his identity was confirmed before he could be sent to the hospital? A similar question was asked by a reporter just now. We agree, yes, our colleagues considered it a priority to identify his identity first, because whether he was an arrested person would have an impact on security measures when he was receiving medical treatment. As I said, there is room for improvement. If members of the press are injured, then there is room for us to be more sensitive and to improve on the current arrangement. May I remind members of the press present that please turn your mobile phone to the silent mode. Yes, one more question. I will ask him. I'm from Phoenix Satellite. I'll ask in English and you can answer in Cantonese. So IED was found yesterday. That goes to show that the risks to police officers are quite substantial. So do you have any measure to ensure your security? And then it appears that violence is escalating. The number of rioters might have decreased, but the means they use is more violent. So what measures do you have to control the situation? In relation to your first question, that is the safety of our colleagues. That is our primary concern. We want to ensure the safety of our colleagues in discharging their duties. First, on our gear. Now, we have been upgrading the protective gear of our colleagues. For instance, we have protective elbows, and they also have protective gear for their faces, and because of petrol bombs being hurled at them, we have improved their protective gear against fire. And we will ensure that our colleagues will cover one another when they carry out their duties so as to minimize the risks they faced. Nevertheless, regardless of the challenges we face, we're not going to be intimidated. We are determined to discharge our duty to safeguard the law and order of Hong Kong. And we're also deploying different tactics. You've seen the use of new equipment. For instance, the special vehicle for crowd control, our armored vehicles, and instead of a standoff with rioters, we are now able to respond more rapidly, and we also have special duties to tackle the rioters. So we'll continue to evolve as the violence escalates, hoping to better tackle the situation. Last question, Sing Tao. First, a question for Mr. Tang. When you attended a press conference in August, you promised to review the use of expired tear gas. It's been over 2 months. I'd like to know the outcome of your review. When have you got an interim outcome, or when can we have a final report? And can you give us figures on the use of tear gas that has expired? And it was revealed that you might procure tear gas manufactured in the mainland. I'd like to know whether that is already being used here. And can you give us the number of police officers decoyed as protesters? Because you have asked everyone, including reporters, not to be in the way of police officers when they are carrying out their duties. However, at scenes of clashes, some police officers are black-clad and also masked. They will not display their warrant cards or IU number. So how can members of the public and reporters know whether they are police officers or protesters? And as for the Indonesian journalist injured by a police officer, I'd like to know whether the police officer concerned has been suspended from duty. I'd like to know whether you have started your investigation into his conduct. If not, can we have the reasons, please? And regarding the case of the woman whose eye was became blind in one eye outside the Tsim Sha Tsui police station, I'd like to know the progress. Why have you been so passive in this case? Is it in line with your usual guideline and practice?
On the use of expired tear gas, since August we've decided to stop using them, that we will not be using expired tear gas. As for the different categories of different ammunitions, I'll defer it to Mr. Wong. As for the Indonesian journalist and the lady with the injured eye, I'll defer to Mr. Lee. As for the officers going undercover, it depends on occupation needs. We will adopt different tactics. So we're not necessarily going undercover at protesters. Sometimes we may pretend going undercover of anyone on the streets. And some of the black-clad, are they policemen? The police officers need to discharge their duties in contact with the citizens. We will need to show our warrant card where practicable as soon as possible. I'll now let Mr. Wang to talk about the tear gas, and now we have Mr. Lee to talk about the Tsim Sha Tsui girl and the Indonesian journalist. And last week, this question had been raised whether to be using PRC-made tear gas. At the last press conference, I had told that when we need to replenish and introduce any ammunition, it is not a casual thing. We need to do market investigation to understand the functions and the effects and efficacy, and also through actual testing to be able to achieve the same function and results before we can make a purchase. We will not base our research based on the country origin, because the procurement mechanism is long-standing. So whether we're using PRC ammunition, I can tell you yes, just as I told you last time. So no need for concern. And since we have a standing mechanism and gone through the testing, proved to be achieve its objectives, that's all I want to say. And Dr. Tang told me that it has ceased the use of expired tear gas since August. It was since stopped in August. Why had never been made public? And what's the investigation progress? And on the August press conference, I proclaimed that it has stopped. And I reiterate and confirm that we no longer use expired tear gas. So this is a permanent ban. As for the progress is to investigate it, and under what circumstances, why will we using expired tear gas. Now hand over to Mr. Lee on the Indonesian journalist and the Tsim Sha Tsui girl with the eye injury. Before I begin, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding was that we had not used ammunition that have passed their best use by date. Well, ammunition will not expire, just the best use by date. So after the past use by date, they may not fire or achieve what the police wanted to achieve. As for the there was some misunderstanding that whether the expired ammunition may lead to injury. They may not set off or may not achieve the intended effects. As for this reason, we call them that they were passed by our best effective date. As for the Indonesian journalist that was injured in Wan Chai, our police have been very concerned. We will send our condolences to the journalists. And I would like to rewind. So what happened that day? According to our records, or from the footage we saw, at that time, our colleague close to the O'Brien flyover, they've been discharging their duty, and they were chased by the rioters and hurled debris and hard objects in the opposite direction. And our colleagues were in retreat, and you can see from the footage, our colleagues attempt to walk down the staircase. At the later time, some of the rioters hurling petrol bombs and on the direction of the officers retreating. While being chased by the rioters, and other colleagues have been tried to resist while retreating, that this journalist have been hit by a stray bullet and fell to the ground. After the incident, we proactively tried to get to the facts, and initially we tried to contact the Indonesian consulate. And we tried to find out the recovery progress, as understand that she is still under treatment. So in this physical condition, she is not ready for a police investigation. Our complaint against police division has been investigating, and we have received the correspondence from the lawyer representing her, and we have attempted to reply to this lawyer's letters. May I stress that in our complaint handling mechanism, we attach great importance to and also deal with this complaint fairly and objectively. And this complaint will comply with the requirements of the IPCC ordinance. And we let the IPCC conduct an independent review on this. As according to the lawyer for this Indonesian journalist, it's very likely that they will begin legal proceedings at the High Court. As for the details of our investigation, or for the viewpoints raised in the public or any kind of request, and since there's a legal court case pending, we're not in a position to make further comment. That's all for me. The police will compare the handling of the two cases. I also said I cannot say more about this case because the person concerned had already launched a judicial review on the request for medical information, and for the nature and all quite fundamentally different in quite a few aspects as well. That's the end of the press conferences. Thank you for coming.